who is our eternal rock and our Redeemer. Is Princeton facing a crisis? Are we facing a crisis? The Greek word from which we get the word crisis, and which sounds identical, literally means decision. It has roots in the words to judge, or to make a judgment, to exercise judgment. So does Winston have a decision to make? Will it take clear, God-guided judgment to make it? Today, you will be deciding whether or not to enter into the first stage of a building project. We had 2 weeks ago, the building committee gave us their report, and we have had 2 weeks to prayerfully reflect and seek God's guidance and will for the future course of our church. Is this a crisis? A decision that takes good judgment? Certainly is a time of decision and a time which will take good judgment. Crisis also indicates a turning point in one's life. A door is closing, and a decision needs to be made as to which side of the door one will stand when it closes. That decision will indicate or limit future paths. A turning point, a decision time, a time which takes clear judgment. So, crisis is what we are in the truest sense of the word crisis. Is crisis a stressful thing? Is making a decision something that should cause us worry and tension, should keep us up at night? Is crisis something that we should be worried about? It completely depends. If you are a person who doesn't have God in your life, then worry is absolutely appropriate. If God is not in your life and guiding you, you should not only be worried about major decisions, but should be worried all the time. For a person who isn't guided by God, who doesn't have God living within them, worry should be the norm. But for those of us who have God living within us and guiding us, crisis, decision points should never cause us any stress whatsoever. Making a decision should not cause us, making a crisis decision should not cause us any more angst than deciding what to eat for breakfast, or deciding which route to take to a friend's house. To build or not to build, that is not the question with which we wrestle today. Rather, the question we need to ask is, does God favor building, or does He favor not building? If God is in favor of building, no power in the universe can stop it. And if God is against building, no pressure, no matter how great, should influence us to enter into building. The question we must answer today, then, is, does God want us to build, or does He want us to not build? The same principles that we're looking at in the light of the discussion of whether or not to build are principles that we can apply to our daily lives when making decisions on all sorts of things: which job to choose, which house to buy, whether or not to have children or another child. These decisions, all decisions, are the same in this regard. And this is essentially what Psalm 127 teaches us today. It's a psalm written either by or for Solomon. It's either dedicated to him or written by him, because Solomon was the one who built God's temple. He built God's house. And it opens up with a line about building a house. In Solomon's case, it was a house of worship, as it is in ours. We looked at Psalm 131 2 weeks ago, and we saw that the Psalms in this section of the Bible are grouped in threes, called triads. 3 Psalms together with a theme that ties them all together. Well, our psalm today, Psalm 127, is also in a triad along with Psalm 126 and 128, before and after. All three psalms talk about the importance of God's blessing an event or blessing an endeavor for their success. Psalm 126, before our passage today, says that it was God who freed his people from captivity. God's blessing was on their release and return to Israel. And it was God who filled their hearts with joy for the journey. Psalm 127, our passage for today, says that godless endeavors are doomed to fail. While it turns around and says that God-full endeavors are destined to succeed. God-filled endeavors are destined to succeed. And it concludes with an illustration from the family growth, as an example of God's blessed endeavor. Psalm 128, the third in this group, concludes and picks up on this theme of family and celebrates God as the one who makes family and prospers a family when they belong to a God-fearing Father. Our psalm for today, Psalm 127, makes it clear, first of all, that godless endeavors are doomed to fail. It uses three illustrations to prove this. It says that building a house, protecting a city, and working for profit are all doomed to fail if God is not in them and behind these endeavors. It opens with the line, unless the Lord builds a house, its laborers labor in vain. And this is quite literal and is quite appropriate for our discussion today. Unless God builds the house, those who try to build it are wasting their time. Basically, this is saying that if God doesn't want you to build a house, it's not going to happen. Or maybe you will enter into the building process and find that you are unable to complete the project. Its moral, then, is to be sure that God is behind the building project before you start. Psalm 127 goes on to say, unless the Lord watches over a city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. If God has decided that it's time for a city to be destroyed, then no matter how many soldiers you put on watch, the city will fall. Military might cannot slow God's movement down for even 1 second. It's kind of like trying to stand in front of a train and stop it. You press your hands firmly on the front of the engine as the train is beginning to move. It's kind of like that because it's futile, impossible, and dangerous. You're placing yourself, you're not going to stop the train, and there's a good possibility that you're going to get run over in the process of doing it. The third illustration that godless endeavors are doomed to fail is that in our personal labor, and when we labor for profit. It says, in vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. If God has decided that you will not have food, you could work around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that food will never materialize. If your goal is to have $1 million, no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you save, no matter how wise you invest, your profits will always fall short. A godless endeavor is doomed to fail. The Bible also reaffirms this notion in other places. When Jesus is talking about a person going to heaven on their own merit, he says, this is impossible. It's a godless endeavor. It won't happen. You're more likely to squeeze a camel through the eye of a needle than accomplish this without God. Godless endeavors are doomed to fail. Jesus asks, can you add a single day to your life by worrying? He asks the question. The implied answer is absolutely not. How can you do it? Without God, not a day can be added to our lives. What if God wanted you to live an extra day? There's no way you could die. If God is against it, it's not going to happen. We can't do it without God. It's kind of like these movies where somebody gets their fate told to them. You're going to die in a year or something like that, and they do everything they can to avoid their fate. And everything that they do makes the fate come true. A godless endeavor is doomed to fail, no matter how wise or crafty we are.